is starting at 3:39 p.m. and present is Donna Seppi, Todd Kempton, Nancy Fortier-Brown, Terry McGuire, Matt Marshall, Becky Fleck, and myself, Angela Hardy, Director of Curriculum. We have a pretty full agenda in this hour.
Excuse
We
me
have
one second. Excuse me one second. Can you just read the disclaimer again? The sound was off at the very beginning. Thank you.
My pleasure. In accordance with an act to implement provisions necessary to the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens of Maine in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency, as enacted to read Section G11 MRSA 403A, public proceedings with remote access during declaration of state emergency to COVID-19 and for 30 days following the termination of that state of emergency. The curriculum committee meeting will be held through Google Meet. The meeting will be live streamed and available for viewing at MSAD11.org. We called the meeting to order at 3:39. We have the quorum with 3 members of the curriculum committee to include Becky Fleck, Nancy Fortier-Brown, and Matt Marshall. Okay, folks, so the agenda was posted. We did a revised agenda yesterday to include community service hours reduction request by Gardner High School, but we need support through the curriculum committee in order to make that adjustment in our program of studies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present the proposal, and then I'm going to ask, since Chad is here, I'm going to ask him to talk through the revision. One thing to take note of is that due to COVID-19 and our physical school closure last spring, we brought a request forward last spring to adjust the community service hours for the graduating class of 2020. And that was approved. And here we are halfway through the next school year, and with so many changes or restrictions due to the continued pandemic, the high school is bringing forth another proposal. Chad, do you want to take it away?
Sure. As Angela said, based on last spring when we went into a major shutdown with the pandemic, we reduced the graduation requirement by 7.5 hours, which is a half a year or a semester's worth when you prorate it out for 15 hours per year of the 60 hours. So given the fall and now that we're into second semester, I'm still finding that there are a lot of parents that are reaching out to us saying that they can't access community service because people just aren't either interested or aren't open for business, and that's putting a major stress on some people, especially as seniors. So when I talked with my department chairs last week, we talked about this, and what this proposal is having people be responsible for their hours based on semesters prior to and post pandemic. And what that does is that gets us down to 37.5 hours for the seniors, juniors, and sophomores, and 45 for the freshmen, because the freshmen will have been through 1 year of it, and everyone else have been through 3 semesters of it.
So are there any questions about this proposal or comments?
And hopefully it never doesn't carry on into next school year.
Yeah, that proposal makes sense, Chad. Obviously with the continued pandemic, it's difficult for kids to get out and volunteer, and areas that they were volunteering in have dried up, I'm sure. So it does make sense, I think.
Are you finding a lot of students unable to do any kind of community service?
Yes, I don't get as much as some of the other folks get as far as questions go, but I do get a lot of questions about where people can do it, and that when they reach out to different organizations, the organizations are not accepting community service. So what we've been trying to do is get kids to help out neighbors, fall cleanup, shoveling, raking, mowing lawns, et cetera, stuff that's outside that would be, obviously keep them in a safe zone, but, and not doing inside work at neighbors, which could spread the virus potentially, not knowingly. So it's a tricky situation, and it could set up for a good deed to result in a bad ending. And it just really just isn't worth it.
I fully support this. I know that there are some people that are getting hours, which I'd like to applaud those kids that are going out of their way to try to find things that are safe.
Yep.
But I do support this.
Yep.
Chad, I wonder, at the end of the year, I don't remember last year, but the year before at the awards ceremony you do, class day, you have had recognition of community service hours accrued over a certain period of time. Do you anticipate still doing that this coming year?
Yes.
So students who have been able to kind of work around the restrictions or prior to the pandemic really built up their hours, as they go to graduate, they'll still be recognized.
Yes. We recognize all of our graduates who have 100 hours or more of documented community service.
Thank you. Becky, do you have any questions or comments?
I'm just sad we have to do this, but it makes complete sense. And I think that it could be a good deed gone bad if we're not really careful. It's really unfortunate. I hope we wear masks and get beyond this so that we can resume some sort of normal life. Thank you for working on this, Chad.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Chad. I have a child in a high school, in a different high school, who's also her usual avenues for community service have been stymied. So she's certainly looking, and it was in the paper this weekend where Lewiston High School is also adapting its practices because of the similar situation. So I'm sure this is a struggle for lots of high school students. So Chad, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think when the pandemic is hopefully over within the next 6 or 7 months, when things get back hopefully to normal and the numbers start to really decrease, that you'll see a ton of volunteer opportunities start to get kicked around. So it's just a bump in the road, and obviously we're going to need to adjust. So.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I hope that's true. So it looks like I can say that this committee fully supports the modification. Becky, do you believe that it should go to the full board, or can they make progress on this and we'll do it?
I think that my belief is the board would support this, because this is something that Chad, I don't know that the board needs to mash it up again. Right. I think the board will support it, and that if there's traction that Chad can make, that he should make it.
Great. Just wanted to make sure we're clear.
I think that's fine. And bring it to the board for information.
Yeah, and when we report out at the curriculum meeting level.
Yes. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so Chad, we're good with that.
So do you want me to hold off on communicating this out until the board meets, or do you want me just to push it out now?
Push it out now. Push it out. And just bring it to the board for information. Nobody's going to say that's a bad idea. I mean, it makes logical sense that this
Yep.
needs to happen. So
Okay,
bring it for
I'll
information.
put it in my next letter to parents.
Thank you.
Great. And you, since you've launched some of the enrollment practices for next year, this will be timely. People are thinking about moving forward. So this will be another piece of information that probably will help them feel more secure.
Yeah, did you see our tech savvy letter that we sent out with all the links and videos?
I did. I don't know if this team did, but if you'd like to see it, it's worth it. Their guidance counselors or school counselors did a beautiful job with an opening video. And then there was a whole host of links and resources and opportunities to interact virtually, sort of. They really went into the 21st century full bore this year.
I'd like to see that. Send it out.
I would also.
You good with that, Chad? You let me know if you need any support in getting that out to the team.
Yeah, it's the best one is the freshman, because instead of doing the 8th grade parent night, we did it with pre-recorded videos. So each of the content areas did a short little video of what the kids need to sign up for. And at the top of the letter, there's a link for Sue and Rachel, and they just do an opening of welcoming, kids to the high school and signing up for classes. So where we're not able to do our traditional 8th grade parent night, we just did it electronically. So I'll share that one, and then I put the link to the programmer studies and stuff. So I'll share that with the board. I think I have access to the board emails. If I don't, I'll ship it through Martha.
That's super, Chad. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's worth taking a few minutes out to watch them.
I bet Sue is very entertaining.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I can hardly wait.
And so what, Chad, do you want to stay on for a few minutes for the seal of biliteracy? I'm
Sure.
gonna say something with that too. So for this, let me just get the right tab open. So wait till it presents. So the Maine Department of Education supports something called a Maine Seal of Biliteracy, and it is just what it sounds like. It's an opportunity for students to be recognized for their efforts at becoming fairly fluent in 2 languages. And there's lots of pathways to secure the seal, and there is a process that it has to be approved. It goes through a school process, and it has to be approved at the state level and there's a rolling application process. Once it's approved, then schools are issued basically a seal, like a specialty insignia that goes on the transcript and or the diploma. And then students can use that on their resume or their application process to colleges or workforce. And this is really nice because if we have students who have a native language other than English, they can become proficient in English, and then they can earn the seal of biliteracy. And for students where English is their first language or their native language, they can move through a course of study, such as in our school, French or Spanish and Latin, actually, and take certain assessments, receive certain scores, and then they can earn a seal of biliteracy. We haven't set this up yet in our district, but we're bringing it to you for endorsement in concept. If you support the concept, then what we will do is continue to engage in the conversations and the work at the high school level, which requires an adjustment to the program of studies. And we've been working on some draft language in case. And it requires me in my level to build space in our assessment calendar to support students' opportunities to assess against the language that they're trying to represent proficiency in, or the 2 languages they're trying to represent proficiency in. And then make sure we set up through the school counseling office an official timeline so that the communication is really clear and the pathways for securing this endorsement are really clear. So the state's really great. There's lots of resources to support this. And I'll just scroll quickly here, not to get into all the weeds, but I just want to be really clear about what this means. There is an established set of criteria. So, but there's multiple ways to secure English proficiency. Any of these pathways. They meet the ELA standards required for graduation, and our system is currently set up at the high school to document proficiency of standards as well as receive like a cumulative grade to score a certain score in the SAT, but they don't have to, they can choose any one of these 4 options to secure a 3 or above on an AP English exam, or if a student is identified as English language learner, to score a composite proficiency of 4.5 on the access test, which we already have embedded in our system for students identified as English language learners. So there's 4 different ways that they can secure their English proficiency. 2 of them are embedded in pathways for any student or for students identified as ELL, and 2 of them are kind of supplemental, the AP exam or the SAT, but you only need to secure proficiency in one level, one of those. And then for the additional language, there's lots of options. And in our system, what we'd be looking at is providing options on something called the STAMP or the Avant test. Those are both in here. It depends on the language that the student is trying to secure proficiency in. And potentially we'd like to explore the ACTFL, which is the Association of Teachers of Foreign Language. And there's a certain set of assessments that are available. These are really cost efficient. The tests are like $20. So it's something that we can either build into, a budget early on, and then, or defray the costs of for students. And that's something we'd like to explore. We do have 2 students who would like to try for the seal of biliteracy this year, if the concept is endorsed as a pilot. So we wouldn't have all the parts and pieces put in place, but we can still run a pilot and apply and have the students apply through the Department of Education through that avenue. These are 2 students who are identified as English language learners, and so they would actually be taking an exam on their native language, and then using one of the either their ELL proficiency exam or their ELA standards graduation components to apply to the state for their seal of biliteracy. Because of the pandemic, if a student graduated last year, we can still have that student move forward if one of the students is a recent graduate as part of our pilot. So that's the
Angela,
Go ahead.
maybe this is a question for Chad. I'm not sure, or you might know. How, on average, would you say, how many students do you think would want to be interested in this per year? And you just mentioned 2, but
yeah, when I asked,
are we talking like a dozen per year?
I asked our ELL teacher and our world language teachers. For ELL, she said, in a given year, it might be 1 to 2 or 3, if any. And then, because usually it's at the end, getting closer to the end of their high school career when they would work towards this. And for our world language teachers, they imagine it would be mostly students in the level 4 courses, and maybe not all of them. So maybe 20 to 40% of those students. So they were thinking probably under a dozen, until, and maybe up to 20 in the long run. But they don't imagine that would be the case in the first few years. It would need to gain some traction.
Okay, thank you.
And Chad, do you have any other? That's we talked through in our meeting. Do you think that was accurate?
About right, I would say.
Okay.
With the 3 different languages, you might get 25, 30 kids that run up through the level 4.
And then not all of them will want to take it, but some will. Oh, let me.
I think it'll be something that will take a grip over time as more kids become aware of it, experience it, and see the benefit from it. Then that's typically how things grow.
I think it's exciting. I think it's an awesome opportunity.
Yeah, we're trying to just continue to build pathways for students for recognition in areas where they are excelling or where they have some unique advantages, and we want to recognize that. And Chad's always working with his staff on dual enrollment and balancing that with AP. And this is just one other kind of recognition piece that they have to work for, but it's available. It could be available. Hi, Veronica. Welcome.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
That's okay. We are just discussing the concept of the seal of biliteracy. And we just went through kind of the criteria, and that what we're hoping for is an endorsement from the curriculum committee in concept, so that we can work through the details at the high school level.
Oh, that sounds great.
Angela, I think you probably have the support. I know you have mine. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Super. Thank you. Thanks, Chad, for staying through that.
Sure.
Our next item is, our next 3 items are professional learning, a literacy curriculum, K-8 literacy curriculum update. I guess those are the 2 items. So Chad, you're welcome to stay on if you want to. If you have other pressing matters, we don't take it personally.
Okay.
Thanks, Chad. I appreciate it. Okay. This next one, professional learning, is sort of just an update and to provide some context as to where we're at, keep you in the loop, because especially after the last meeting where we said how important professional learning is to the development of our staff, and especially when implementing new curriculum. And this year, everything is new with new teaching and learning strategies and new resources. And I just kind of wanted to give you a little context. I'm not going to share a tab unless you'd like to see it, which is perfectly fine. I'm just going to provide a quick summary. So I came in 2018, so that's where I'm going to start. For 2018-19, I have documented 813 and a half contact hours that we issued that year to our staff. And that includes curriculum committee work, professional development internally. So what it doesn't include is if someone goes off to a conference outside the district, even if we pay for it, I don't manage those contact hours. Those are issued by the organization who provided the professional development. So teachers maintain those, or staff maintain those and provide those to the recertification committee, but they don't get generated within this office. Last year was a unique year because we were on track to exceed that number in general. We did have a physical closure in March, but because of the support of the board, we were able to modify our calendar some, and we did provide some extensive professional learning, especially in early in March and then again in June at the end of the year, in order to be prepared for whatever might come our way this school year. So we actually were able to secure 2,234 contact hours. So that's over 200% increase in 1 year. And that does not yet include all of the PD contact hours that were issued for a whole host of our ed tech learning series. Those were a little harder to count because I didn't set up my spreadsheet properly. And it does not include the coaching cycle hours, which are usually about 16 hours for each coaching cycle, and we had a lot of them. So those are still being tabulated. So 2,234. This year, at this point in the year, so we're halfway through the year, to not include any of our curriculum committee meetings yet, our coaching cycles, or our book studies, because we have calculated those on a separate sheet and I need to embed them in. We already have 2,907.25 contact hours that our staff have earned internally at MSAD11. So that's without external professional learning. And that was mostly because we were able to have extensive time in August for preparation and planning. And we had spent 1,292 of those contact hours, each hour, each time one person participates for an hour, each person gets an hour. So 1,292 contact hours just in social emotional learning. In curriculum so far, we've had 457 contact hours. And in instructional technology, we've had 1,124 contact hours. And we just launched some on-demand professional learning for staff, which crosses over those areas, but I'm separating it because I want to monitor it as 34 hours. So again, that doesn't include our our coaching cycles, our book studies, or our curriculum committee meetings. So I feel like we're certainly using the time that the board has made available to us. Some of these are also led by internal MSAD11 educators, either the instructional coaches or some lead teachers who've really stepped up and become really skilled in certain areas, and have become comfortable working with their peers. And then in some cases we have, it was mostly around curriculum, we have had external support. So I wanted to give you an update on that. Any questions on that?
How does morale seem to be in relationship to all of the professional development? I think before, if I remember correctly, they were feeling that maybe they weren't having enough instruction time. Have things changed? Are they feeling the benefits that you're providing them?
So I do have a new form that we've been using since June that asks every time they complete a professional learning experience, they rate it on a scale of 1 to 5, and then they actually go through and provide some responses as to what was valuable, what could be better, what do you still need, what's the best use of your time, and I read every one of those. And sometimes they're all over the place, but a lot of times there's sort of a trend. When a peer who's really skilled in something shares and leads, we have really strong responses. They really respect and appreciate their colleagues and that does include our coaches as well. They respect and appreciate their colleagues who have really tested it out and know what works and doesn't work with students. We've also worked really hard at, if we've noticed that there's an area of repeated concern or questions, we try to come back pretty quickly in the next few weeks using these Wednesdays and provide a learning experience that's about an hour long, so it's manageable. And those have gone over really well. There were a few social emotional learning experiences that didn't hit the mark. For some. And what I found was some of it's like some people really need to be part of a community and process with a community, and explore how they're feeling in relation to the new content. And others don't want to do that in community. They want to do that sort of in their own space. And so that's where the disconnect certainly lied, is certain presenters lean that way, others don't. So we did a session on inclusive schools, welcoming, affirming, and inclusive schools for LGBTQ plus students using Outmain. That was highly well received. It was relevant. It was the right amount of time. It was responsive to some questions people had, but it also didn't. It actually provided an opportunity for some reflection, but didn't require people to really expose their feelings and beliefs, but created space for them to process that on their own, even in the session. Whereas we had another session that really talked about isolation and anxiety in students, but the first part of it really had them explore their own feelings of isolation and anxiety in small groups with each other in a virtual setting that was welcome to some and not to others. So that's where the morale kind of tips and trying to make sure we provide the balance so that and some choice, really looking at trying to find different opportunities for teachers to have choice in their learning and rather than requirements. So we've been really cautious about what's required and what is optional. Does that help?
It does, and it's actually been a very exciting meeting so far. Everything
Oh,
is very
good.
positive. So
Well,
yay!
Yay is right. Sometimes, I think it's stressful. Teachers are stressed and, you learn something and sometimes we take it literally when we learn it, when it was meant to be like just a concept, abstract experience and see, you take what you can and you make it work or you don't. So we've had just a little follow-up reflection with some folks, like reminding them that, that's one idea that works in one place. It may or may not work in your place, or reminding folks that, okay, I've noticed you've gone to a lot of the options and that's super, but now you're feeling overwhelmed. Pick one thing or two things and try to get really good at those. Terry and her team are really good at reminding folks about that. Like, you don't have to do every option that we have. We have options so that people can pick where they're going to be strong, develop those skills, and become good at those rather than feeling like they have to be good at everything in this brand new environment. And I don't know that that message is really heard yet universally, but it's certainly something we're trying to help people come understand. But it's kind of exciting because it's a lot of learning. And honestly, it's a lot of learning, but it's not a lot of dollars spent. That's the infrastructure. There was a lot of dollars spent, especially around instructional technology, and we used the grant funds for that. But a lot of this learning, anytime someone facilitates, we do try to make sure they get a contact hour as well, but that theirs says presenter on it. Right? They were the presenter, so they can use that in the recertification process. But most of the social emotional learning or curriculum work that's been accessed through external presenters are really, for the most part, pretty cost effective and certainly have kept us well within budget. So that's exciting too. So that's the professional learning update. We have a March workshop day. We're in the throes of planning for that. And people are already kind of looking ahead to June. But we'll get there eventually. All right, literacy curriculum update. How am I doing on time? We're right on track. I do want to share one thing. It's going to look a lot. I'm only sharing it so you can see all of the steps people are going through. I'm not going to read through it because there's a lot. So let me get the other tab up. Too many tabs open. Can't remember what it's called. This, let me just make sure. K-12, there it is. Okay. Waiting for it to show on your screen. So The K-12 ELA Curriculum Committee is in full swing. It almost felt like a sigh of relief for me, but I felt like I heard it from some staff when I finally started relaunching these curriculum committees this year. It's like one thing that's kind of normal and grounded in what we do. I have divided the committee in half right now. We have a K-5, active K-5 group and an active 6-12 group. They meet the same week. They meet every other week after school virtually. And right now we are in the process of finalizing our ELA vision for teaching and learning that aligns with our district vision for teaching and learning. So what does it look like in the ELA area? We're taking our first drafts of curriculum and using those to help us align instructional resource options. And then as we get closer to selecting an option, we'll tighten the curriculum to make sure they sync. And the goal is to have all that done by June at the latest. And in order to ensure that our instructional resource review is pretty rigorous and we get what we want, and we're all on the same page about what that looks like, we created a scoring tool that we use, or a review tool, that is grounded in work from different ed research organizations nationally, about what are the strong elements in a literacy program of study K-12. As each program or resource comes forward, the curriculum committee reviews up to 4 or 5 at each grade span. We narrow it down to 2. And then from there, we'll bring it out to different grade spans for review against those 2 using the same tool. And we'll narrow it down to a first and second and bring that to this committee. So just so you're aware, in ELA, it's just as complex as when we did this in math. There's a whole lot of descriptive language that we're looking for specific points around text quality and complexity in our ELA resources. And that goes all there. Around foundational reading skills, specifically for our pre-K to 2 students, we want to make sure whatever instructional resources we're using have all of these elements. We may select more than one, so it might not be one program. It may be smaller programs that come together for a classroom grade level, or it may be one cohesive program. And that's something we'll bring forward as we have clarity. So that's on foundational skills. We're looking at elements of speaking and listening, specifically academic language that's introduced, used, and processed in evidence-based discussions, using different modalities or grouping structures with students. Writing is a significant portion of our literacy material review. And then instructional supports and inclusiveness. Our goal is to ensure that all students can be in the classroom and fully engaged in the grade level material and access it. And to do that effectively, our resources need to provide supports, suggestions, and conceptual understanding for staff, because not every teacher comes an expert in every content area, especially in those elementary grades. It's not fair to ask them, so we want to make sure the resources are really strong and research-based in this area specifically, so helping with common misconceptions, routines for classroom discourse, multiple entry points. This includes technology, assessments, and actually, can we accomplish what is expected to be accomplished within a school year? A lot of teachers get frustrated when you end up buying something and there's just no way you can do that in a year, because it was never really vetted well. And then here are 2 other areas that are always part of a curriculum review process that I bring forward to the committee and have them review based on information I research. So that is, what does their professional learning look like? What kind of professional learning supports come with the resource? And does it have all these different elements? I'm looking for a lot of specific elements around adult learning. And is it affordable? Is it something our district can manage and afford? And then I just linked in our resources. So I just wanted you to be aware this is a really thorough process. It required that the team co-created this document. I started with some different research-based organizations that have documents similar to this, and then we went through, connected it to the work we've done for the last couple of years to develop this review guide. And we already started. So the middle school group started this week on their first review of a resource, and the elementary school group will start on Thursday. Any questions on that? There's a lot happening here. Okay, well, I'm assuming silence is good news. No news is good news.
Angela, I want to comment that you're right. No news is good news, but how much can we get accomplished in a year? And that's a really good question. And I'm going to turn it back on somebody who I know from the Maine's educator leadership class and say, it depends.
Yeah, and this year in particular, right?
It really depends on
Mhm.
that. And that was such great insight that you shared in this other arena, but it depends. And this is a really difficult year to project.
Yeah, this year we've implemented a math program and curriculum, the curriculum K-8 and the math program K-5, and piloting one at the 6-8 level. And we've definitely made some significant adjustments. And we've made some new resources and gotten teachers together to calibrate and say, okay, we have to make some big decisions. And what's in the best interest of our students, and how can we do this so that we're not racing through material and having students not really understand it, because that's not going to help us in the long run. How are we going to learn deeply what we need to learn? And then how are we going to come to agreements about which areas are we going to not go deeply into? And how will we accommodate that next year to make sure that those students don't have a big gap in the long run, just in the short run,
Right.
but that they'll know the material they're working through in a significant way. And it's hard. It's hard to come to those agreements. It's hard to follow through with those agreements. But the teachers are really committed. And we've also looked at it vertically so they can see what's the grade level before them and after them agreed upon, and how will that impact them.
And
So
so
we're
the deeper learning that happens now has to be able to be translated and overlapped into the deeper learning that comes next.
Yep. Yep. It's also revealed some conversations, because it's new, about like this, about what is expected at a grade level, and how do you know, and how do you use the standards to check on that? Because we haven't had a new math in a program, and we really haven't gone into the standards as deeply as we have this past year. There are some practices that we've uncovered that's like, oh, you don't have to go that far this year. You just need to make sure they really understand these practices really well. And that practice is actually reserved for the next year. But historically, they may have done it in that grade level. So it's great, because it uncovers some really interesting things and allows us to converse around those. And no one's wrong. It's just different.
Opens up other opportunities.
Yeah, the more transparent and open we can be about it, and find ways to succinctly document it so that we can be reminded when we get in the throes of things,
Right.
the more effective we'll be in the long run as kids move from one grade level to another,
Right.
across buildings even. Yeah, that's our goal. There is a little note in here about handwriting, cursive, and keyboarding, and I won't show you the full document because it's still in draft form, like significant draft form. My notes are all over it right now. But I did want to kind of put this plug in here, because it comes up. It always comes up, right? Where do we stand on cursive? Where do we stand on typing? How is this playing out? And who owns it? Because handwriting isn't always really a literacy standard, as or cursive or typing. It is a little bit more embedded in the ELA standards now. There's reference to that. And so without ownership, it doesn't get taken care of. And so but this district's pretty unique because it actually has paid attention to this for a lot of years. So we're just refining our expectations and trying to streamline some of our work and make it manageable for staff. So it's gone through the curriculum committees and it needs to go through broader staff review. And it needs to also go through kind of a resource review, which is what I'm working on right now, like who's responsible for what part of it. But basically what we're saying is we are going to continue to teach handwriting starting in pre-K, right up through second grade, where pre-K is a lot about grip, posture, and the start of formation. And then kindergarten, you move into significant letter formation and letter cues. There's language that we use to cue students into that letter formation at capital and lowercase letters. And then second grade is about refinement, especially if students need additional support. Third grade, we're introducing cursive. And again, that is one where people are like, do people need cursive anymore? But we've decided in our district that it's an opportunity for students to communicate efficiently and effectively. It's the whole point of handwriting, cursive, and typing is to communicate efficiently and effectively. And cursive provides another pathway for students to communicate. Some students actually really struggle with the handwriting, but with cursive, because you're not lifting up your writing utensil, it's a smoother process. And for some students, it's more manageable and they can communicate more efficiently after they've learned cursive. And it'll give them a chance to learn how to sign their name and to read
Yes.
some cursive, right? And so we aren't going to spend as many years on it, but we are definitely still going to introduce it in third grade. And in fourth grade, we're going to reinforce it by just at the beginning of the year, revisiting it, and then asking that at least one assignment a week is conducted in cursive. And that just gives practice. It can be as an assignment like a spelling assignment. It doesn't have to be a 3-page paper or anything, but something where they just continue to practice and hone those skills. And then what's new is we'd like to introduce typing in fourth or fifth grade, but what we're trying to figure out now is where does the direct instruction lie, at what grade level, and who will provide the direct instruction. Honestly, trying to have every teacher in the district across fourth or fifth grade learn how to teach typing is not an efficient or effective means, but having them understand what are the criteria for effective typing, which is like posture, building stamina, using the home row keys, stuff like that. Right, exactly, Becky. Those are things that we can kind of build some awareness around and encourage and reinforce in the classroom. And so we're looking at who do we have on staff and for what roles and purposes, and is this something we can do in each building? So that's the part, it's why I haven't brought the whole thing to you, but I wanted to help you be aware. We're kind of looking at that and saying, what's the most effective and efficient way to do that? Currently, students they don't officially learn typing until high school. And yet we have these devices for students starting in pre-kindergarten. Research, we did spend some time looking at the research, and it does say that it's not a good practice to teach typing before children are 7 or 8. They're developmentally. So that's around third grade. But because we have a stance on cursive, it feels like fourth grade's a more developmentally appropriate time. It's also a transition point for us in the use of like Google Classroom over Seesaw and some other instructional technology. We do have typing programs that are set up for students to access through Clever already. In some fourth grade classrooms or other classrooms, they already access those typing programs and practice. But what they aren't getting is that official direct instruction weekly. So that's the part we're kind of exploring and understanding what does that look like and what would it look like at the middle school. So we're going to continue to try to build that out and refine that this year, kind of take a stance on it and see if we have the human resources to support it that are already in the district using what we already have. So I wanted to kind of put
Angela, I really love.
Go ahead, Matt.
I really love the idea of teaching cursive and supporting it. I think it teaches kids how to legitimately sign their name, and it gives them a little bit of an opportunity to add their own little twist to their writing. You know, if you look at my mother, for example, she writes in cursive exclusively, and I could look at 10 different types of writing, and I would be able to pick hers out in an instant because it's so unique, right? So each student, I think, has an opportunity to have their own unique way of writing in cursive, which is kind of nice, I think.
I agree with the continuation of cursive. I was happy to hear that. As a mother, I will own my own, but I just recently, well, within the last few years, and my youngest kids are 25 now, but I just recently found out that one of mine doesn't even know how to read cursive. And my mother, you know, the generations before me, that's what they wrote was in cursive. So it's sad to me that that could be a dying thing. so so I'm happy that we're going to continue to encourage it.
Thanks, Nancy. And again, for us, it was about if our goal is to communicate efficiently and effectively, what pathways are we offering students to do that? So the additional pathway that isn't brought up is like, you know, there's oral communication. So that will be brought into the ELA standards and the curriculum work through speaking and listening strategies, and then accommodations to support that, speech to text, and other accommodations that we already have built into our system for students. It's just, we want to be really explicit about the handwriting, cursive, and keyboarding because it tends to be a nebulous area for a lot of districts. And it's just an opportunity to build this into the curricular work while we're at it. Super. And those are all the elements or the pieces of our agenda this time around. It's pretty full.
Hey, Angela, I have one question, and it's not related to the agenda. I know last month we talked a little bit about special funding for knowledge loss and being able to potentially beef up curriculum with special monies. Has there been any discussion since last month's meeting to maybe start allowing or thinking about taking some of the special funds and being able to use it in curriculum, given that there's probably quite a bit of knowledge loss?
Definitely looking into it. I have gotten a few little marks on the spreadsheet, specifically around intervention resources and strategies. The big challenge we're having right now is understanding if we want to, is reducing class size going to be one of our most impactful ways of attending to learning loss in the long run by having fewer students in the classroom, more adult attention, and managing that across the district, which then impacts the use of funds towards staffing and facilities. And if that's not our theory of action, then it would, then we would need to redirect towards the learning time and learning resources. Those are kind of the conversations going on. So time would we then instead want to invest in additional time for students who are struggling, whether that be through additional interventions during the school day or after school or summer programming. And the research is really mixed in that area. Additional time does not help learners if the additional time is organized in a certain way. And so that's what's clear and concrete. There's some pretty clear research about if you're going to provide additional time, especially outside of the school day, these are the elements that are really critical for it to be impactful. And one of them, of course, is access. Can students get there and stay and routinely be there? Attendance being a significant factor. But a lot of it is really around meaning and purpose for the students. If it's just additional drill, kill, worksheets, that sort of thing, there tends to be negative learning or neutral learning. And so that's just something we would have to really consider in the design. So again, it's like, is our theory of action to reduce class size and increase that student to teacher ratio, or adjust that student to teacher ratio over 2 years within the time frame we have available? Or is it to attend to a targeted group of students through additional instructional time built in through the day and after school and summer? And either one of those is really expensive. And so which way does it go? What I'd like to do is, in whichever way they go, where can I influence the use of some of the funds for some of our significant instructional resource needs? Because they will attend to this learning loss need like we suggested, and that may defray some of our local budget concerns. But we're not quite at that point, although we need to be soon because we're going to have to apply for those funds pretty soon.
And if we're going to do something like offer after school learning or summer learning, it has to have great rigor.
Yes.
And it needs to be really meaningful. And I think sometimes the summer programs, through no fault of their own, and never having lived through a pandemic, haven't necessarily been sort of that bucket of unaccounted for time and little field trips around town. And
yeah, and we were really concerned about staffing after this year, who's going to want to be available to commit in the summer.
right.
Through a coordinated effort with the Gardner Teachers Association, we did learn that there are a handful of staff members at different grade levels, elementary, middle, and high school, who would be willing to commit to the design process and to the instructional opportunity. And so that may influence our decision as to how we apply for these funds now that we know that information. But we only received that this week, so we're
Really
still
great.
going to process that as a team.
That's great.
Yeah, it's exciting that these, our teachers really care about our kids. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I just know how tired so many of them are, that I kind of was. So Matt, we'll try to get some clarity on that probably after vacation week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, folks, I know we started a little late, but we made it within the hour exactly. So that's pretty exciting. Thank you, Becky, for joining in so that we could have a quorum. I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Veronica, for joining us as soon as you were able to. I will work on getting these minutes up to date, and hopefully you'll be getting some links from Chad with a few videos to watch. I think that will be really interesting for you, and I would encourage you to take a few minutes to watch it. It's fun. Thank you for your time. We meet again on March 9th, and I will try to be having data for you about fall to winter growth, student learning growth that we have at our elementary school.
Great meeting.
Thank you, everyone, for making it